feel like the last 6 months have also come with a lot of self-reflection and growth. And a lot of that's kind of hard. On the menu today at Sarah's Soju Cafe is red wine. So grab your mugs and let's chat about quitting our job. Happy Soju Friday to all my Soju shotties, Sarah hotties, and potentially Juicy J's. I don't know, you guys have to earn it because James is not here. He's actually across from me in the office, just like working on his own stuff, but he has his headphones on, so I don't even think he knows I'm talking about him. So I can say all I want about him right now. And maybe we can slander our co-host a little bit while he's gone today. But no, we do not slander on this podcast. But if this is your first time here, thank you for joining. My name is Sarah. I'm your co-host. I usually say host, but I feel like James is inching his way up there as the co-host. James is my boyfriend for anyone that's new. But welcome to this podcast about navigating adulthood, your 20s, 30s, and beyond. We talk about anything from career to love to finances, sometimes to growing and evolving within yourself, and to all of our little journeys in life. And I feel like today I wanted to talk about a specific part of my journey, which is quitting my job. Some of you guys know I quit in April, so it's been 6 months, and that's kind of crazy to think about because I feel like I haven't even gotten my footing. And I feel like in any job, there's always that ramp up period. And I feel like I haven't even ramped up halfway yet. So it feels weird, but I wanted to talk about that today. And before we get into the episode, I wanted to do a little drink of the day. We have red wine. This is a French wine. I'm not going to try to pronounce it, even though I took AP French in high school. But I recently came to the realization that I might be a wine mom when I get older. And I feel like I have a little bit of a craving for wine now. Like with any single meal, I just ask James like, hey, do you want to have a glass of wine? Like we don't even have to finish a bottle, just like one glass with like the steak we're having today, or just something to go down easy with our meal. There is that saying, I don't know if it's true or not, that red wine is good. Like a glass of red wine is good every single day. I think they say that about chocolate too, but I feel like someone who has an addiction to chocolate or red wine probably was the one to make that up if it is a lie. But I have been just working a lot recently, and I feel like I've been a little bit behind on the podcast episodes. It kind of just has been a last minute like scramble to get an episode out. So I do want to apologize for that. However, I will say last week's episode was one of my favorites that we've done ever because James and I both kind of talked about some family experiences that we had this year, and I think they were very meaningful family experiences for us and kind of turning points for both of us in our relationship with our families. So I really recommend that episode if you guys want to go take a listen. A lot of you guys resonated, and I really, really loved reading all the comments about how your relationship with your family has evolved over the years or how you relate to what we were saying. So thank you for listening for anyone that did listen. But anyways, today I wanted to sit down and talk about quitting my job. Since some of you guys know I quit in April, so it recently officially passed the 6-month mark of me quitting my job, so officially half a year. And I've been wanting to do some form of a post, whether it's like sharing on my Instagram or on my YouTube channel about my reflections 6 months out and what I'm feeling, what I've learned, how I'm navigating this period of my life and this chapter of my life. Quite frankly, I got kind of bombarded with my own feelings recently. Like I've just been feeling kind of the weight of things hit me a little bit more. And oh my God, I'm getting too TMI, but I have been a little depressed. And I think it is a combination of like the season changing and just a lot of things really picking up. I'm getting a little bit of like PTSD from how I felt when I used to work corporate and then do my social media on the side, because back then I felt like I couldn't breathe. And recently I've been feeling that way. So I wanted to do some reflections because as much as I thought this 6-month update would be really positive and uplifting, and it might be a little bit of that on my like other forms of social media because I feel like I don't have a space to really talk through my mental state and all that. But I feel like the last 6 months have also come with a lot of self-reflection and growth. And a lot of that's kind of hard. Like I knew from the beginning when I quit my job that there'd be a lot of growth and learning that comes with it, because everyone always says that when you quit your job, you learn so much about yourself. Like the level of growth that you have is unmatched with when you're working for someone else. And I think recently it's been hitting me a lot more because a lot of things have happened, a lot of good things actually. And I also sometimes feel guilty that I feel negative emotions too, because in my head, I'm like, well, now that I'm out of a corporate job, shouldn't I be feeling all the positive emotions, like all the great things that I was kind of envisioning for myself and imagining when I did quit my job? So, not to keep saying the word quit my job like 10 billion more times, but I wanted to jump into lessons because I think that's the format that I'm most used to sharing. And I don't want to keep like pounding this format, but I think it's the easiest way of me expressing the things that I've been thinking about on my mind. So, let's get into it. Maybe a little bit of context and backstory would be helpful here for anyone who's new. Before I trauma dump, I'm just going to say my name is Sarah. I am currently a ceramics artist. I wouldn't say full-time because I also do content and this podcast. And so you'll see me across various mediums and platforms. So YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, but also here. And I feel like I've kind of been juggling that. Although I will say the line is kind of blurry when it comes to being an artist, because I do think the job nowadays of being an artist does come with the territory of doing social media. So I'm really curious for anyone else who is an artist and a content creator too, what you actually call yourself. But I've been calling myself a ceramics artist / creator / small business owner, depending on the circumstance. But recently I did my first drop and my first launch of my small business, and it went really well. And I'm very, very thankful for everyone that showed up for the drop. We actually sold out within 2 minutes, which was way beyond my expectation. This was for a first pre-made batch that I had made already in the studio, but I also tagged on a little bit more of like pre-order inventory that I hadn't created yet. So there's a little bit of work that I'm doing in the pottery studio right now to get the pre-order batch also finalized so I can ship everything out at once. I don't know why I decided that I would ship them all together at once, but I felt like it was only fair for everyone that ordered to get their orders around the same time. I might think differently about this for my next drop, but I do want to say that I'm so tremendously grateful for the turnout. Like every single person that has been supportive along this journey and has been there for me, whether it's online or in person. That's like the biggest silver lining around every negative emotion that I feel. Like I always feel like I have a space to be in terms of where I belong and also people to show up for. And that's why I absolutely love this community. So I wanted to give a little bit of that preface that in this journey of being a ceramics artist, I have felt really loved and really appreciated. So I thank you guys so much for that. So last week I was in the studio working on a batch of the pre-orders, and I had this moment of realization, and I was in like a deep focus state. I was listening to music. I kind of just like looked up for a second and I was like, oh my God, I have so many weaknesses. And that's going to sound so stupid when I say it out loud, but I don't know. It just came to me in a way where I had some amount of clarity. And I think this is part of my quitting my job journey. But I thought to myself, I have so many weaknesses that I always shrug off. I know I'm a flawed person just like anyone else. And so I'm not saying this out of I'm a perfect person and I was surprised I have weaknesses, because no, I'm like very flawed. I have a lot of problems with myself. And one of the things I realized is I have a problem with just ignoring the things that need to be fixed. And I know this is a self-help podcast and we always talk about ways to like grow and improve. And I try my best to also be evolving as a person. But I think in that moment, it felt like I was having kind of an epiphany that if I don't fix the things like my weak points and like the things that I'm not very strong at, I think I will stagnate in life in a way that I am kind of like disappointed in myself. And to kind of like clarify what I mean, because it might be a little ambiguous, there's certain traits that I have that I'm aware are not good. So one of them being having scarcity mindset, one of them being my unwillingness to like invest and spend money on things that I enjoy, whether it's like a hobby or something like a passion project, like what I'm trying to do now. Just I find like the scrappiest way to do stuff. And that's one of the things that I realized hinders me a lot. But another one is also, well, there's kind of like a laundry list. I could go through so many of them, but another one I think manifested very prominently in the last 5 years, which is my unwillingness to quit my job. And that is a combination of like me ignoring my scarcity mindset and not being able to grow out of it, but also my risk aversion and never, ever, ever letting my other feelings about what I'm doing or myself overtake that risk aversion. So in a way, I felt like I am also very scared as a person. So anyways, just a lot of things that I feel like I've always shrugged off in the past, because when I had a corporate job, I felt like I could ignore those problems in a way. Like, I felt like it's okay, if I'm scrappy with things that I do because there's a constant in my life, which is my corporate job. So I'll keep earning money, I'll keep evolving, I'll keep having something to show up for, like my work. And nothing about it's going to change if I fix my scarcity mindset or not. I will have this job as long as I keep working in it. Same with that weakness of like risk aversion. There's no circumstance at work where I'm like really, really tested on how much risk I'm willing to take, because at work, it's like I get handed a project, I do it. And sometimes I have a little bit of a say on how like the project goes, but I'm not in a position where I'm really leading the growth of, the company, and I need to make big risky decisions. I guess I've just never been tested that way. So when I was sitting there and doing my ceramics, I had a wave of thoughts overcome me. One of them being, wow, my weaknesses are so prominent right now. Like, I can trace back all the slowdowns in my life, like where I'm blocking myself in life just because of my weaknesses. And I couldn't do that 6 months ago when I was working corporate. A very prime example of that is here I was in the pottery studio working on a batch of ceramics. Recently, it's actually been really hard. I give tremendous kudos to anyone that starts a small business, especially a handmade arts business, because ever since I decided to take this leap of faith, it's been incredibly slow. And a lot of the slowness is actually stemming from me. And I'll talk about my weaknesses there. But I realized that it's so hard. And I knew this before, like it's so hard to create a sustainable business around something that you personally make yourself. And so recently I've been thinking about, how do I scale this? Like, how do I make this actually something that is sustainable for me and allows me to also lead a life, where I get to create, but I also get to do new things. So as I was making these mini shoes that I have been making, it hit me that a couple of months ago, like 4 months ago, I had this idea to do like a collection of shoes, pretty much 20 shoes. I started off with 20 shoes. Then I cut it down to 10 shoes because I was like, okay, 20 shoes is not going to be reasonable. I set my sight on launching in September with 20 shoes. And back then I was very naive because I was getting my footing into the small business scene. And so I was so ambitious for no reason. But very, very shortly after I realized that that is not possible. And so once I cut that down, I was like, okay, from 10 shoes, let's maybe do like 5 shoes because I think that's manageable. And then by the time that like I had finished refining the first shoe that I started off with that kind of like spawned the inspiration for this whole collection, I realized that a couple of months had passed and I spent all this time refining this one shoe, just like making all the little details perfect. And I know people appreciate it. And I personally appreciate it too when like something that I have has so much love and care put into it. But I realized that I had spent months just iterating on one shoe. And so a part of me was kind of disappointed that when I launched, I only had one product to launch, which now looking back, I'm okay with because it is my first time doing stuff. And one of the other weaknesses that I realized is I have this tendency to want everything to be great off the bat. It doesn't have to be like even perfect. It's just I want it to be impressive or great or phenomenal. And I think that was what ailed me last year when I was like starting my podcast up. I actually delayed a lot too because I wanted things to be perfect and amazing and blow things out of the water. But handmade art is such a different territory and I'm so new to it. So after I launched, I was spending still like my days in the studio making this one shoe. At this point, it was like batching these shoes. And so the last couple of weeks, I have been trying to wrap up this whole batch. But in the meantime, I actually realized that I've stopped all of the random projects that I've been doing. So little ceramics pieces that I haven't glazed yet, I haven't gone to that. I have all these ideas for other types of projects and ceramics pieces I want to make just for myself or like to test like a functional piece that I've been sitting on with my ideas for a while. But as I was sitting there working on my ceramics, I realized that I have a really hard time investing into my crafts. I'm doing a lot of things by hand right now. And one of the things that I realized is I don't really grow much as a person sometimes because I stay stuck in my ways. One of those ways being like, I just perfected this shoe that I spent months trying to improve and make more functional and more practical. But now what I'm doing is making each of them by hand, repeating the process over and over. I'm stopping myself from actually trying out new things and expanding that collection of shoes that I wanted to originally. And so I realized that I have a hard time, one, asking for help. And that's a big thing that I've always been really bad at, actually. James is actually really, really phenomenal at asking for help. Like, he is always reaching out to people who he sees as potential mentors, and he has mentors already that are like older than him. And a lot of the mentors that I have in my life have just like kind of been in my stratosphere because of, for example, work. So I have them by default because of my work, but I've never really like sought out help. And that's one of the things that I realized as I was doing this, that I kind of do need a little bit of support on things sometimes. Like, even if it is just a pointer or a tip or someone to like really help guide me through a process, I always have a tendency to want to do things myself. And that is true of, you know, my social media too. Like, I have a hard time handing off my footage to people to help me with editing. I have a hard time just asking for like, you know, support on things like graphic design or like designing my logo for my brand, which I ended up just doing myself because I was like, well, I don't know, it would be nice to like work on this myself. But that's one of the biggest things that I was like, if I don't nip this in the bud right now, how am I going to scale a small business? How am I going to get the small business to be at a point where I am able to sustain it for like many years to come and not just have it as a pet project like I do with everything else, because I try to manage everything myself. So that was one of the primary thoughts that I had in that specific moment. And then after that, ever since then, the last, I would say like week and a half, I've just been continuously overthinking a little bit of like my weaknesses. Now that I don't have a corporate job to fall back onto, it's almost like black and white, which I think is not a healthy way to look at it. But maybe that's been contributing to a little bit of my sadness, which is I have been noticing more and more of these like small little weaknesses impacting my life. One of them also being like my inability to invest. I do invest my money, so I am very, I think, financially smart with my money, but to a point where I find anything that is not putting my money into investments or stocks and things like that as a dumb financial decision. And I think you just cannot operate like that when it comes to small businesses. So there's a lot of things that I want to do with my business that require investments. And I don't know, in my head, I'm like, you know, you just need to dig into your savings to make something happen for yourself, you know? And so I think because I was taught from such a young age that digging into your savings means that you are like, I don't know, going bankrupt or something bad is happening. I've just had an uber resistance to taking out money to put into something that I am proud of or that I have a lot of faith in. And I realized that this is kind of a side tangent, but I actually realized that when I started thinking along the lines of, okay, how do I start working on this business, making it sustainable for me? And I started reaching out to local studios to ask for support in any ways that I can. So I don't think I'm at that point where I want to hand off my work to people. Like I do want to have, you know, my work for myself that I'm able to output. But one of the things that a lot of people have been recommending to me is slip casting, which is basically creating this mold of the piece that you're making. And instead of hand making everything, which requires you to kind of make each piece by hand and attach it and create all the little nooks and stuff, you can just pour what essentially is like liquid clay into a mold and have that form the shape of what you want, and then clean it up afterwards and then put it all into the kiln. I did ask around. I asked my studio if they do any sort of classes on slip casting or creating molds or have any tools or anything in the studio that I can use to make that. And they said that they don't. So I was a little disappointed. And then I kind of like put that on the back burner and didn't touch that idea for another couple weeks. But then recently, because I was like, okay, I need to nip all these weaknesses in the bud. I need to ask for help. I need to be willing to invest into my craft. I started looking into slip casting and how to do it because I was like, maybe I could just do it at home. I think it is a little toxic. So then my next thought after that, because I wasn't sure where exactly to do it because we don't really have a closed off art studio space exactly. Like there's no door to close off our living space from the office. So then I was like, okay, well, I don't want to expose Moose, our cat, to the fumes and all that or whatever is toxic with the plaster. So then I started emailing different studios and asking for a quote if they were to help me create a little mold for my piece. And I got the quote back, and I'm going to tell you guys how much one of the places quoted me. I haven't really heard back from the other ones yet, so I need to follow up. But one of them quoted me $750 for one single mold, and I was actually planning to get 10 molds. So then I was like, okay, I hope that doesn't scale up proportionally or like linearly, So that is like 7,500. But even the number 750 kind of like turned me off a little bit. And I was like, oh, maybe I should look into if I can do this on our fire escape. Probably not a good idea. Or if I should just keep hand building. And so I kind of like pushed that thought away. And then the other day I told James about it and he was like, 750 is not bad for an investment into your business. And it hit me that I was doing that thing again where I try to be scrappy always, or I try to, find as many ways possible not to pour investments into my business. And so I was like, okay, maybe I need to like rethink this. Maybe I need to be better about taking a more critical lens about what is worth investing in and what is not worth investing in, and start from there, because I do think I sometimes stop myself from growing in that space. So very long story short, one of the biggest lessons and one of the biggest things that I've been learning to navigate is growing from my weaknesses and not shunning it away just because I'm not used to it, like just because it's a habit that I don't have. This might be a really bad analogy, but I actually wanted to compare this to Jimmy from Love is Blind. If you guys remember, there was a guy that was dating the self-proclaimed Megan Fox lookalike on the show. And recently on social media, he's been doing videos. Like he's been doing social media like a lot of the other contestants, but he has been looking better and he got a hair transplant. He's been working out. Like you can tell he looks better. And all the comments are people like literally just like being like, oh my God, what happened to you? You glowed up so much. Or like people just remarking on his glow up. And I think I saw one of his videos where it popped up on my feed and he said, if it were not for reality TV and me being on that show, I actually wouldn't be so self-aware of all the things I needed to fix or all the things that I wanted to fix or I felt insecure about myself. So one of them, I think he was talking about his receding hairline and how he finally bit the bullet and got a hair transplant, which is something he's been thinking about for years already. And if not for social media, he wouldn't have started working out because now he's super fit. But I think because of all the criticism and self-awareness that you gain through being in the public lens and public eye, he said that he's actually grateful that he grew from that. So this might be a very butchered synopsis of what he said, but it kind of reminded me of what I was saying, where a lot of my flaws and weaknesses are now amplified because I am self-employed and not relying on a corporate job to kind of provide me that comfort and stability. It's really pushing me more in the direction of really acting on my weaknesses or things that I feel like do need to be improved. So yeah, random analogy. I just wanted to throw it in because I saw that reel like 2 days ago. The other thing that has somehow become more amplified since quitting my job is the way of being able to manage your own time now. This is kind of a time management reflection, but I did a time audit 2 weeks ago with my boyfriend, and we kind of just wrote down what we were doing every single hour of the day. And one of the things I realized was I actually spend a lot of my time doing life things, and part of it is like helping my parents with stuff. So my mom will sometimes call me. She literally called me yesterday to ask me to clip a coupon for her online, but just like random small things. But I realized it actually compounds over the day, like over the course of a day. Every single day for the days that we were doing the time audit, I had maybe like 2 to 4 hours blocked off for just random things that I had to deal with, whether it's like a UPS package I needed to go pick up, or a call I was on with my mom for an hour to kind of like sort something out, or just some other life thing, not including like cooking and stuff like that. But the week of the time audit, I also got really frustrated because I could feel all these things that I was doing. I could feel that my time was getting eaten up by, walking to the post office, waiting in line, picking something up, coming back home, or being on a call with my mom, trying to figure out something, try to read a document for her, stuff like that. And compared to when I worked my job, I felt like I had more of a negative reaction towards this because I realized that everything feels like it's on my clock now. So not to expose myself a little bit, but when I was working corporate, I would sometimes take time during the work day to like go to a dentist appointment or go to pick up a package. And because I was on a work schedule, like on a 8-hour work clock, taking half an hour out of my day to go somewhere and get something didn't feel like it was eating up my time, if that makes sense. And I don't know if you feel the same when you're working corporate, that you feel much more okay taking time out of your workday to go do something. But in like the seasons that the work wasn't so busy, it was much, much easier to do that without feeling any guilt. And I think this is the feeling I was trying to articulate. I felt a lot of guilt. And I've been feeling a lot of guilt when I take time for myself during the day, especially for a personal life matter. I used to not feel any sort of guilt for helping, my mom, but I feel a little guilty to myself for pushing my schedule or like doing things that don't line up with what I set myself up to do that day. And so that's a feeling that I don't think I've really found a solution for yet, which is the impending feeling of guilt for when you take time out of your day, which now every single hour can be a work day, and it feels like every single hour is a work day, and actually taking time to live or to do something, to pick up a package. Yeah, if you have any tips on like how to feel better about that, or like how to even just time manage and allocate that time better, let me know. I actually found that my frustration was highest when all this life stuff intercepted my work day, like throughout it. Because if I had blocked out, a whole morning from 9 a.m. to noon to do life stuff, but then the whole rest of the day I could have to myself, I think those days are actually better than if I have like a 1 p.m. thing where I need to go somewhere and a 3 p.m. thing where I need to take a call and, that kind of schedule. But yeah, let me know if you have any tips for navigating that. The next thing that I wanted to kind of tie back into what I just said is I feel like because every hour is now self-controlled, technically, it feels I am actually really exhausted. When I quit my job, I thought that I'd have more freedom in my life. I'd have more time to myself. I'd be able to do more of the stuff that I couldn't or felt like I couldn't do because of a lack of time. Let me think of what was on that list. I think I used to want to be a Pilates girly a lot more, and I wanted to go more to fitness classes and do that and get on my fitness grind. I wanted to cook more. Actually, there was a period where when I had just quit my job and before I started this whole work hustle and grind and the small business stuff, I actually was cooking a lot more. And I realized recently that I'm really tired and really exhausted, and that's my own doing. But because every hour can be technically a work hour, I have somehow forced it to be that, and I want to just chillax a little. I want to just be better about recognizing when I'm stretching myself too thin or putting too much on my plate. To be honest, this was also a recent reality check because I was getting dinner with 2 girlfriends, and for some reason we started looking at photos from back then, like back 4 years ago. And we were talking about like, oh, we look so young, oh, your face was so much fuller, all these random things. And then one of my friends said, Sarah, you look like life has beaten you down. And my other friend was like, you mean her today? And she was like, no, like always, like you've always looked like life has beaten you down. And I don't know, I wasn't offended, but it definitely hit me that it doesn't just feel that way in my head, that sometimes it actually like shows in the way that I look. And if you go to some podcast episodes, I definitely think there's ones where my eyes are just like glazing over and I'm still just talking like a normal person. But I have a tendency to overwork, and I've known that for the last 5 years. Ever since I jumped into the corporate space, I feel like I've just somehow taken not even a fondness. It's like just taken a habit of working myself all the time. But for the past 5 years, I don't think there's been a weekend where I've actually really taken to rest or recover. If I have weekends off where I'm out and about and doing stuff, it's to attend someone else's event. It's to be there to support someone else's thing, to be at a birthday party, to go out because someone else wants to go out. I don't think I've made an active decision to enjoy my life. And the only time I will say that I actually did was the month after I quit. I think I took 2 months off before I announced anything and before I did anything. And I honestly think that was like the peak of when I had all the enlightenment and felt really good about quitting. And I felt like everything was on a high. And I think in that episode, when I came back and I was like, the 10 rules of starting over, I really felt like that was a peak in how I have been operating. And honestly, that's when a lot of good habits started forming, like cooking healthy meals every week and going to the gym. I was actually kind of consistent going to the gym. But recently, I also feel like I just blinked and I realized I now am doing a ton of things. If I'm self-reflecting, the reason why I do this is because I underestimate the time it takes to do things. And so in my head, it's like, okay, it's totally fine this week if I have a podcast episode, a YouTube video, 2-3 short form videos, also work on my small business pieces that I need to release this month, and then also have like a art commission that I'm juggling that I actually haven't really talked about on my social media yet. But I'm like, okay, it's totally reasonable if, let's say Monday I spend doing the podcast, Tuesday I spend doing the YouTube video Wednesday. And then I end up stacking my full week just like that without realizing that I actually need time to like take a break. So when I heard my friend saying that I always look tired and I always look exhausted, I was like, oh man, I also feel like I'm always tired and exhausted. And so that was a big reality check. And I think I came home and reflected and kind of like sat there and thought about my habits and realized that I can't always do everything at once. And there's certain times when I have to pause one thing in order to get something else done. And it's okay. And I shouldn't feel bad for that. Again, a lot of this I actually know, but it's only recently that I realized I really, really need to nip all my bad habits in the bud. Otherwise, they'll just compound and I can't progress and grow and, whatever life or career journey I go down. So, yeah. The next thing that I really didn't think I would feel so much is after I quit my job, I felt like I always needed to prove myself to people. And it's like, not even a specific person. I could maybe pinpoint it to like, I need to prove myself to haters or people that want to hate on me. But it's just really just an overarching, I want to prove myself and not really to anyone. I think because I put myself in a position where I'm public and I'm online, I feel like I need to always be doing something. And that might be why I do end up piling on all these random things onto my schedule or onto my plate. But I do you think a toxic or maybe like flawed trait that I have is I feel like if I don't prove myself to people or if I don't try my very best to prove myself to people, that in my head I'm like, people just won't respect me or people just won't think highly of me, which is very far from the truth. I think sometimes you do need to prove yourself. Like there's certain situations where, if you're going up for a promotion or you're competing with someone in a challenge, you need to like prove that you're smart and competent and like capable for something. But I've gotten into a habit of always wanting to prove myself to people, and that's not really healthy because I realized part of why I try to do so much is like, one, because I really do have an interest in something and I want to put it out into the world as fast as I can. But two, I feel guilty to the public if I'm not doing anything with my life. One of the biggest fears that I had right before I quit my job was that people would think that I'm a lazy influencer. Because there is that stereotype of just like girls or really anyone online that quits their job and does content, but then all they're doing is like massive overconsumption and mindless, out of touch content. And that was the furthest thing from what I wanted to be. But I had this overwhelming fear that people would see me that way the moment I, put in my resignation. And to counter that, I feel like sometimes I over-index onto working myself to the ground just to prove a point or just to prove I'm not like that. And I think it's really, really unhealthy to think that way. And I'm sure a lot of people who do social media and also work jobs think this too, which is like, you just fear people's judgment of you. And so as I was thinking about my weaknesses, I think one of my biggest weaknesses is the fear of what people will think or say about things I do. And I had this realization too, because I was reflecting on just like stuff I've been putting out, whether it's like my artwork online or the type of content that I put out. And I realized I've really deprived myself of something I used to really enjoy putting out, which is fashion videos or simply the girly stuff. Like I used to do a lot of beauty tutorials on YouTube, and I don't do any of that anymore, but I want to. But when it comes down to, okay, today, should I make a video about an art piece that I'm working on or a video where I'm just doing my makeup and talking, I always say, okay, I should probably put out my artwork because, that's the more legitimate thing. That's the more appropriate thing. That's the less vain thing. And so I do think sometimes this toxic trait restricts me from actually doing things I want to, or kind of just like being myself a little more because I'm like over anticipating what people will say. And then I'm curbing myself from doing certain things that I actually do quite enjoy or want to do myself. I do think when I was working corporate, I kind of used it as a crutch. Like, I might be getting a little too raw, but I think when you're on social media, there's certain things, like when you create content, there's certain things that are built in crutches, like they're really low-hanging fruit, if that makes sense. And talking about the job you work almost immediately gets people to think that you're like really relatable. Obviously, like not everyone, right? Because not everyone's different. And so it also comes down to personality. But I do think that when people are working jobs, there's almost an instantaneous gravitation that like certain audience members have because they're like, okay, she is down to earth. because she works corporate and like it's already a proven thing. It's kind of like at work, because you're around other people that are in the same company and have gone through interviews to get to, you know, similar positions as you, your probably immediate instinct meeting them is like, oh, they're qualified for this job and they have the skills that I probably have, so I can like talk to them immediately about certain things. I think on social media, the moment someone's like, I have a corporate job, everyone's like, you're so relatable. I don't think it's like fully true, but I think there's some elements there that I do want to share. So when I left my job, because I didn't have that sort of like social crutch in a way, I also felt like I overcompensated, or felt the need to overcompensate on how much I'm working and how ambitious I am and how hardworking I am. But I'm just a girl. I'm just a girl and I want to enjoy life. I want to be a girl and also do the things I love and also not always feel like, you know, I need people to validate me. Oh my God, I think this episode's gonna be so long, but I just feel like today I actually am pouring my heart out. I know I did a check-in a couple weeks ago, but if I'm gonna be honest, I feel like when I'm not plugged in and filming my episodes, sometimes the episodes don't come out exactly the way that I feel in my head because I'm a little bit zoned out, or I'm actually just in such a bad mental state. And I think you can probably tell if you're a soju shawty who has been listening for a long time. But I actually feel very comforted by today's episode. I think this week's been so hard and I've just been like tearing up whenever I can. I also think I'm getting my period, so that's probably why. But yeah, I feel like today I'm being really like raw with you guys, and I'm just thankful that I feel comfortable enough to share with you guys because you guys make this space so comfortable for me. I think one of the biggest lessons that I've come to learn the last couple of months is I need to do things imperfectly before they can be perfect. And I kind of hinted at this earlier when I was talking about my podcast and how I actually delayed a couple months because I wanted everything to be perfect. But I delayed my small business this time around too. I said I was going to launch in April. I ended up launching in end of October, like the very end of October, October 30th. And part of it is because I was perfecting the one product that I was putting out. And that wasn't even the thing I was most excited to put out. It was just the first thing that I started in the process. And I realized I delayed myself so much because I wanted that to be perfect. And at a certain point, right before I was announcing that I was going to launch, I actually said, okay, should I delay it 2 more weeks? Because I actually didn't give thought to, you know, the marketing assets, the campaign. What am I going to do to roll this out? What is like the journey that I should take on instead of just throwing together some stuff and like posting it and being like, we're going to drop. I actually ended up doing that because I just felt like there's so many things that you can stop yourself from doing because you want to be perfect or because you want it to be perfect. And what also really hit me was that I think I'm a little over ambitious with my goals sometimes, and that leads me to not hit it and then get disappointed. And so with this first drop with my small business, I was trying not to be too hard on myself to make things perfect, because in my head, the way that I kind of saw it was that my hope is that this small business can last for many years, if not decades, if not, this is so ambitious, if not be like a legacy brand that I can pass on to my kids. I don't know. But I was like, let me just take this process iteratively. If I want this to actually be a journey, I have to treat it like a journey where I'm growing as I'm going. And I can't just spend all this time, all this effort making one perfect thing, but then burning myself out doing that and then never coming back with another thing. So all in all, I personally felt like I actually am very proud of myself for scrapping together all the things I needed to. I created 3 graphics and assets for the launch. I put together the website. I set up all the international shipping stuff. There's so much logistics and behind the scenes. Even picking out packaging is so hard. But I just like spent all that time putting together everything I needed for this small drop. And in my head, I see it as like a early drop, like a very early, if you know, you know, kind of thing, where there really wasn't that much fanfare, and I didn't really need there to be that much fanfare. But I ended up being really proud that we did get it out October 30th. But I realized that I just need to do things imperfectly before I get it perfect. I spent all this time trying to make the product perfect, and then I just couldn't bear, you know, another month trying to make just the online graphics perfect to a T. So I did my very best. I'm still very proud of what I did, but there's just so much that I have stored up that I'm really excited to execute. Anyways, going back to the first point, that is actually one of the other weaknesses that I was thinking about too, which is perfectionism and how that is really restricting and really holds you back a lot when it comes to being able to output stuff. In my very short-lived experience as a creator and an entrepreneur, quote unquote entrepreneur. I feel like it sounds tacky whenever you call yourself an entrepreneur. But I think in my own journey, I've learned that anytime that I'm trying to perfect things, I just lose the steam after I output for the first time. And I just don't want that to happen. So I'm being very iterative, even if things are not at the 100% of how I want things to be. And the level at which I want things to be, I know I will get there in the long run, as long as I keep my head forward and keep improving with every single drop and opportunity that I have. So that's one thing. Another thing is learning to limit myself within the confines of what I want to do. When I was working corporate, something I got really used to and became honestly a really bad habit for me is multitasking, because the way that my days were set up, it was basically I would go to work, I'd come home, I'd do my social media, sometimes I'd film in the office, so then it's kind of merged a little bit, and then I would film my podcast episodes at night. So I was always juggling things, but then I recently realized how bad it is to juggle things. I have a hard time saying no to myself. I feel like I've learned to say no to other people and to be sorry, I really just can't make it out tonight. I'm, not feeling good, or other things like that. So I've been working on that, the external no saying, but I actually have to learn how to say no to myself. And that's actually sometimes harder, because I talked about this earlier, but I have a way of underestimating the time it'll take for me to do things. And so sometimes that's why I don't say no to myself, because I'm oh, I can always squeeze in a little bit of time here. I can do some quick audio feedback and reviews on the train over to my studio, which I've been doing recently with my podcast edits. It's I'll listen to it on the way over and I'll take notes on the timestamps of what I need to edit out and stuff like that. But I'm realizing that leads me to losing my focus, or losing what my priorities are and forgetting what I'm really, really setting out to do with myself, which I'm also figuring out. But lately, my weeks have been really split across, small business stuff, whether it's being in the studio, physically working on stuff, or dealing with some customer service requests or shipping logistics and stuff like that, because I haven't shipped out my stuff yet. But I also have been finding myself splitting that time with some of my social media, because I've been wanting to post a lot more in short form, and I've been trying my best, but it's really hard to do every single day. So I think right now I'm at a 2 times, 3 times a week cadence for Instagram and TikTok. And then I've been trying to post a YouTube video. I can't even say every week. I would say maybe every 2 weeks. And then I also have a weekly podcast episode that I always film. And then on Thursdays, I take a good chunk of the day to finalize and clean up so that we can upload it. And then when I actually wrote it down the other day and took a look at it, I was wow, this is not something that I can manage forever. I can't be doing 5 work streams forever in my life. Maybe I might be able to juggle this now, but I need to learn how to limit myself and to really, really figure out what my priorities are and to focus on that so I can do it well. Otherwise, I'm doing everything mediocrely. Like I said, I used to do when I was working corporate and doing content, I felt like everything was mediocre. I think I'm trekking down the same territory if I don't curb myself. So yeah, that is one thing. And I will say I'm really grateful, because right after I quit my job, I actually got a little bit nervous because I wasn't really getting that many opportunities. I also hadn't started posting more frequently. And so I had a moment of, okay, what is it going to look like literally financially for me to be self-employed? How am I trying to build up my business? Me as a brand and my business as a brand. I think as a consequence of, the work that I've been putting into all the work streams, it has been picking up. And I think I've been very blessed to have a lot more opportunities recently, whether it is on social media or commission opportunities, or just doing this first drop and having it sell out. I'm so, so proud and so thankful. But I think with it comes all these new elements of okay, so for commissions, how do I structure my commissions? How do I set up the payment system? How do I set up the communication, with the people who have commissioned me? How do I set up the small business? How do I set up a workflow for my podcast? Because I don't have every evening now to think about the podcast the way that I used to, and just how to do everything at once. And that is a question that I have to tackle myself. I'm at the beginning stages of trying to figure out the answer to that in terms of like what I prioritize and what I want to focus on. But one of the lessons is just that you do need to start learning how to say no to yourself in order to kind of like move forward and find your focus. One of the other things that hit me recently that I will say contributed a little bit more to my depression, maybe why it's a little more amplified this winter, is I have been feeling a little more lonely. When you're working corporate, I think there's a built-in camaraderie. Whether or not you like your coworkers, you still do show up to a more communal space and you show up to see people. And you also feel like other people understand what you're doing. At least people who are working on the same project as you have just a semblance of like your work, what you're navigating, what corporate politics you have to deal with and stuff like that. But I've been finding it really hard to just open up to people lately. Like I've been finding it actually really hard to express what is troubling me, what is bothering me, and what I've been going through, because I think everything seems so rosy online, like because I really show like the highlights of my life, not intentionally, but just because I do think when I'm navigating the behind the scenes, it's just really chaotic and messy. So I'm not going to be sitting and be like, here's this packaging, but here's all the like 20 options I went through, and here's all the Alibaba searches I did to see if there's alternative packaging that I get more custom through China and, stuff like that. Because I'm on a less traditional path now, I actually find that no one really understands what I'm doing or like the vision of it, because I haven't fully formed it. But also when I'm talking about my stuff, I think the immediate instinct is to kind of congratulate me, because I think the biggest thing that people have seen is that, I've escaped the corporate rat race and that I'm working on stuff and I'm outputting stuff and I actually have output, which I think that's why people tend to think that I'm thriving. But I think I feel very far from thriving. Like I also have a tendency to be kind of ambitious with my life and my career. And so sometimes in my heart, it feels, or maybe in my head, maybe both, it feels like I'm drowning and other people see me as thriving because, I sold out my first drop. And so on paper, it looks really glamorous and really wonderful. But then in the behind the scenes, it's really chaotic and messy. But then it sounds stupid, like when I'm saying, well, now I have to like figure out the shipping logistics. I have to package everything. I have to finish up this pre-order batch. But I think some people's instinct is like, well, but you sold stuff, like, your battle is over now. But also in my head, I'm like, well, this is just like the beginning of their journey. And there's so much hard stuff to get up and climb up in like the small business world. And so, so I've been finding it really hard to express and articulate those emotions. And so because of people's, immediate reaction to congratulate me, I actually find it really difficult. Like I feel like I've been holding a lot of like built up stress to myself. And actually on a similar vein, I've kind of always felt this way with family stuff too. But because this month I feel like I've had a lot more family stuff to help my parents with and to deal with just like random stuff. Like thankfully nothing super dire, but things like their heater not working. And so having to coordinate, getting a new heater and like research that for my parents, or any HOA related things, just random things. And those specific experiences, I've actually never articulated that much to people. I think some of my friends know that I do manage a lot of like the family logistics, but I also feel like I don't have a lot of friends that do that same thing. So when I do talk about it, I always talk about it in passing. But I think that's been also weighing on me a little bit more this month. That is another thing that I feel like I don't really share that much about. But yeah, I will say it is a little bit lonelier. And a lot of people told me that it would be a lonely journey once you quit, but I'm actually living through that. And so to be fair, on a community basis, I actually don't feel physically lonely, because when I go to the studio, I actually have a few friends there now. So I'll be in conversation and talk to people. That's been super, super nice. And I really appreciate that and enjoy that. But from an emotional perspective, I feel very secluded and in my own mental headspace that I've been trekking down. So yeah, but on a very similar basis, I also realized that I can't do things alone, because not just to, circumvent the loneliness, I also think that there's a lot of things that I have now set my sights to with my small business that I want to do. And I realized with just the pace that I do things and how new I am to everything. I just can't handle everything myself. And so a big part of my goals for this year, like the end of this year and next year, is actually learning how to work with people better, because in the past, I've really not given enough attention to, for example, onboarding a good editor for my YouTube channel, because I'm like, well, I could just do this myself. But eventually, if my goal is to grow as a person and as a small business and as a, brand, I just can't always be the one to do every task, to press like upload on an Instagram post, or that's a bad example, but just like small things. So if anyone is looking for work, I'm not formally putting out a hiring call, but I do think sooner or later on my Instagram, I'm going to put out a little form for anyone that's like ambitious, creative, hardworking, who wants to help me with, the small business or my social media and stuff like that. I definitely will be looking for help soon. And I think the last thing that I wanted to say is a reflection that I've been thinking about ever since I quit my job for the last 6 months, is I constantly feel guilty. I constantly feel guilty for not doing enough in a day, for taking time off to, handle, like I mentioned, a USPS thing or a UPS thing, even in social settings, from being mentally distant from people, just because I'm thinking about like, oh man, I need to finish this edit tonight so I can post it tomorrow morning, or just random small things like that. I notice that I tend to have a higher standard for myself now that I'm out of corporate. And so to meet that standard, I actually tend to take myself out of whatever, life I'm living. And that is not healthy. But yeah, I just feel a lot of guilt on things, even on things like following through on what I say I will do. I said I would start a bi-weekly on my Instagram, and I did 2 of those. And then I just felt like everything was catching up. So I stopped doing that. And I kind of preempted a book club, which I was really excited to start on the podcast. But then I kind of slowed down on the podcast the last couple of weeks because I've been ramping up on the small business. So I think I've just really the overarching theme is that I've been learning to grow through my weaknesses and to work on my weaknesses so that I can actually be a stronger person, like mentally, but also in every aspect of my life. I'm really grateful that I have this opportunity to grow and evolve, because I know not everyone does have that. And it's obviously a privilege. I don't want to be one of those people that's always like, I'm privileged because this and that. But it is such a privilege that I get to have platforms where I'm able to grow and where I can have like space to learn from my mistakes and learn from my weaknesses. So I'm trying to really take advantage of that and be there for myself to grow and to evolve and hopefully get to a place where I am happy and successful mentally and physically. So anyways, thank you for listening to today's episode and today's little ramble. This honestly was a ramble. This is the most rambly episode I think I've ever filmed on the podcast, but thank you for being here. I hope some of this resonated. I actually don't know the demographic of soju shotties who are self-employed or just don't have a job. I think I would be kind of surprised though. So if you are self-employed, please leave a little comment saying what your biggest learning lesson from being self-employed is. I would love to hear. And thank you for tuning in on this Soju Friday. I hope you are having a lovely weekend and staying warm. It is kind of getting cold here in the States. If you're in Australia, it is probably warm right now. But I hope you're having a great week, and I will see you next week. Bye.
Bloopers.
It's bloopers. Thank you for listening to today's. Oh my God, I can't do this.